Hello and welcome to the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Powell. This episode marks the beginning of the 7th season of the podcast. I'm really glad you're joining us. For this episode, we'll be listening to the Intimate Bach Duets with the Spanish Guitar Volume 2. This is a Capitol Records release from 1960. The guitarist is Laurindo Almeida, and we have other instrumentalists, Virginia Majewski on viola and Vincent DeRosa on French horn. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. This record, released in 1960 on the Capitol record label SP8582 by Laurindo Almeida, is just really quite a dandy. I have so many things to talk about with this. First of all, what I would say is I'm starting off with Volume 2. I don't have Volume 1 in my possession. I will be finding that and adding that to this podcast because I can't wait to hear it. I stumbled across this in some of my stack of stuff that I've gotten from people, and it's just quite a recording. Laurindo is just one of my favorite guitarists, and he has been for a long time, and this goes back with me personally, clear back to my earliest days in Des Moines, before I even lived in town here, back in 1999 when I had started teaching. And I would come into Des Moines on the weekends many, many times because I had buddies who lived downtown. I taught in the suburbs of Des Moines, and so I lived in communities like Redfield and also in Perry. But in those years, I would come into Des Moines on the weekends, and like all music nerds, we would hit up the library and look at recordings and things like that. And one thing I was fascinated with at the downtown Des Moines library, which it has moved, it's in a different place now, but the old one, and you could go in there and you could get scores. They had classical guitar music in the shelves there. It was great, and there was this really awesome Laurindo Almeida version of classical guitar arrangements, and they were wonderful. One of my favorite versions of Over the Rainbow is in that, and so that's how I got acquainted with Laurindo Almeida the very first time. And I know he also has a jazz and a bossa background too. I know I have learned that by teaching some of my students who have been on the jazz side of life, and they know that name immediately if I ever bring that up. So just fascinating. In terms of musical output, we have some wonderful viola playing by Virginia Majewski. She just does a great job in her segments that she plays. The music is beautiful, and I really enjoy the playing. I think my favorite piece is actually on the second side, so I'll save some of what I'm going to talk about for the flip portion. But we start off with a tune called, the German translation of that is Come Sweet Death, and that is a sacred work by Johann Sebastian Bach, obviously, a song transcribed for the viola. Then the second track, we have Fuga from the Sonata Number 3 in C for unaccompanied violin. That's guitar solo, so no viola helping out with that one. Then we have a Sarabande and double from the Partita Number 1 in B minor for unaccompanied violin. This is done with viola and guitar, and then we finish up with Bourrée and double from Partita Number 1 in B minor for unaccompanied violin with viola. So really, what's going on here after the Komm süßer Tod, Come Sweet Death, we've got some just real heavyweights, the war horses of the violin repertoire, and it's beautiful because superimposed on some of these things, it's not just the violin with the guitar. Laurindo Almeida arranges these pieces, and it's really a treat. You can hear all the stuff. This music is well known to those of us who have listened to some of these classics and studied some of these in our harmony assignments as college students and so forth. And it's just fun to hear these in these treatments. And so what I'll have you listen for, I think, is just the richness of tone in that viola and how well it pairs with the guitar. I think that the musicianship is just absolutely great on this. And I think it's interesting because, if you were to have a viola and a guitar played together, in a room, that viola is just, it's simply going to be louder than the guitar. It's a nice pairing. I think it's probably a better pairing than the violin, which would pierce a lot harder, or the cello, of course, which would really be out of whack. The viola is probably the best choice, but still the viola is going to be a louder instrument than the classical guitar. And so it's interesting how with the mixing capabilities, they can get it sort of just right. I still think even after listening to this record a couple of times, I think that the guitar could have been more, but in any case, I'll let you be the judge of that. So please enjoy side one. We've got Bach Comme Susur Tod, Fuga, Sarabande in double, and then Bourrée in double. So enjoy, and here we go with episode 1 of season 7. Well, I hope you tremendously enjoyed that first side. I think those are some beauties, and I think the treatments of those, certainly in 1960, that would have been just something that people would not have heard. Very unusual combinations, and so very cool that was such a pioneering thing. I know I have done several Laurindo Almeida records, and one of them, I know Laurindo, in my opinion, takes quite a recording risk in recording himself up to 3 times, doing some of these pieces where he does piano pieces by like Rachmaninoff and Debussy and all the voicing and all that sort of thing with the technique of overdubbing. And it's just quite fabulous. If you wanted to check that previous episode, that's on Season 1, Episode 5. The title of that is called The Spanish Guitars of Laurindo Almeida from 1961. So it's actually a year after this record is put out. So check that out if you want to hear more on the podcast. I alluded to what my favorite piece was going to be along with the viola, and so you guessed it, you may have guessed that this is going to be one of those classic Bach pieces, right? So we have Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, and once again here we have it with the viola playing the melody part, and it's a great treatment. So we finish up the involvement with Virginia Majewski playing the viola on that with a very, very lovely rendition of that Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring. Enjoy that leading off for side 2 there. Then what we've got to say is just, my goodness, we've got quite a player involved with our horn player, which is Vincent DeRosa. Now, myself, I did not know that name from just reading it. But I looked here, and at the end of this record jacket, it says here, talks about the musicians on here. I think what I'll focus on here is about the last 2 sentences where it says, with regard to being about Vincent DeRosa, that is, he is now in much demand about Hollywood for recording work with the world's finest symphonic conductors, as well as for films and, in quote, popular music. Now keep in mind, this is 1960. I did a little digging on this. My goodness, did this guy play with a lot of people. I'm talking Ella Fitzgerald. I'm talking Frank Sinatra. I'm talking Henry Mancini. I'm talking about tons and tons of soundtracks. And yes, he was very much into band, going all the way into playing with Herbie Hancock in 1980. And so, and this may be very aptly timed. I noticed that he did pass away this July 18th of 2022. I'm going to make sure that I seek out some other recordings of this brilliant musician, Vincent DeRosa, to check out, because he's quite a French horn player. You may or may not know that part of my musical upbringing has to do with brass, specifically the trombone. I played that from 4th grade until a couple of years into college even, and so I respect anybody who plays the brass instrument with great detail, and Vincent certainly does. He's a monster on the horn. And as I was talking about beforehand, the balancing act, again, a brass instrument and a classical guitar, the balance just isn't there. But with the mixing console, absolutely, this thing can be done. And I suppose with virtuosic players, yes, there is great art in playing quietly. But you can tell that this horn player is really going for it on a couple of the things. And so there's some studio magic happening here. I'm not saying that they're not playing their instruments, but I'm saying that levels are manipulated so that there is an illusion of balance here, is what I'm saying, because in general, a French horn is going to be a much, much, much louder instrument than the 6-string classical guitar. This is such a gorgeous piece of work. It is the Partita in B flat for harpsichord, and we have the typical Baroque sequence here: Preludium, Allemande, Courant, Sarabande, Minuets 1 and 2, and Gigue. And so it is a beautiful piece of music, and I will just say, relax, enjoy. Thank you for joining us on this beginning of the 7th season. I have so many fun and creative projects getting ready for this season, some collaborations with people. I have some contacts sent out to people, and I hope that I'm saying these things so that I can sort of put it out in the universe there, and a lot of the things will come to fruition. But I know we're going to be hearing some wonderful things for this upcoming season. It's been a very, very busy semester of teaching, but I have found some spare time here, and here we are with episode 1. And so we've flipped the record. Enjoy side 2. Thank you for listening to the Classical Guitar LPs podcast. Wherever you're listening from, please feel free to contact. You can check out the social media hub. Mainly, I use Instagram for that hub. So that is instagram.com/Powell Guitar. You can see the record jackets and things like that I do in the snapshots. I do put a little bit of stuff on TikTok out there. We'll see how that's working. I also am on Facebook with facebook.com/Powell Guitar. And please reach out. Let me know where you're listening from. If you would like to support this show monetarily, I would also invite you to do that. You may certainly reach out and go to anchor.fm/Powell Guitar. I'd like to specifically give a thank you to a person named Andrew Levy, who has decided to contribute to the show in this way. And thank you, Andrew, for your generous support. Enjoy this first episode. And here is side 2. Thanks for listening.